Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ebony Man 2K, aka that Jolly Rancher, aka Pretty Ricky, what they call me, and aka the original King of Receipts. I welcome you to my channel. Today I will address the controversial YouTuber Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things, and her advisor GINA Bontempo. Now, GINA is not only Pearl's advisor, but she is also a conservative journalist on the conservative right. In this presentation, I will show you who she is connected to and how her connections are heavily influencing the actions of Just Pearly Things in the form of questionable topics, racist talking points, and invitations of racist guests. You will be surprised. This is Ebony Man 2K, the original King of Receipts. Let's get it. Now we're about to move to the last part of my presentation, where I report my findings on Pearl's management team. I will start off with her advisor, GINA Bontempo. GINA is a Harvard grad and an experienced conservative journalist working for major media publications. She is also an author of the book called The Lies of Modern Feminism. In this book, GINA explains how she graduated from Harvard University as an angry atheist taught to hate America, so much that she abandoned her birth country for Australia. When a freak accident sent her back to the U.S., a video by Candace Owens, then others by Dave Rubin and PragerU, opened her eyes to the lies she had been believing all of those terrible years. Now, let's listen to a clip of an interview done with GINA on the Candace Owens show. And I want you to notice how some of her expressions, thoughts, and sentiment are similar to those of Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things.
This one always makes people laugh, but that's why I try to use humor, because I mean it. I'm a person who, I was raised in a conservative Christian household. My parents were always very patriotic, and I was raised to love our country. But the second I got into university, I spent 4 years in college and 2 years in graduate school. I came out on the other side, a very different young lady who deeply hated America. And I left the United States and I said I was never coming back. This country is racist and rotten to its core. And so I moved to South America and I went to Australia for a while, shaved half my head, swore off capitalism, said that the free market was evil. And I went down a deep, dark hole that I think that I see a lot of young millennials and Gen Z in right now. And that deep, dark hole is, like I say, the depths of leftism, where we're really taught to hate our country. We're taught to hate white people. We're taught to think that capitalism is evil. And so I always tell people, if I am able to come back from that, if I'm able to come back from deeply hating America and swing back to being one of the most America-loving patriots there is, anybody can. And so I use that as a message of hope. Also, not only for people who are currently leftists, but also for family members who might see their daughter, their son, their sister, their brother, or even just a friend who is so far to the left. I always give them hope that there is a chance for them to come back.
Well, that leads to the next question, because, I'm Gen X. You guys are millennials. You and Candace Owens, millennials, the biggest generation in our country right now. And so I think every parent or grandparent is out there who may have a situation like you're describing is going, how do I reach them? And how are you and Candace able to team up to reach maybe some of these young minds who have been poisoned, I would argue, by the government-run education system and higher education?
Well, I think the very first thing is that people like Candace Owens, content producers like PragerU, Daily Wire, The Rubin Report, I think first and foremost, what they're willing to do is have the conversations that we're not allowed to have in mainstream media. So that's why you see a lot of people who may be on the fence, people who may even consider themselves to be liberal. Once they hear Candace Owens speak, once they hear someone like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Dave Rubin, once they hear these people interviews on their show and have people on their show who might have different viewpoints, it's just the willingness to have these conversations that may be politically incorrect. And it's the willingness to have the conversations that mainstream media will not let us have. And, I talk a lot about how the radical left is authoritarian in nature. And we see the mainstream media today as an extension of the radical left and an extension of the Democrat Party in so many ways. And the very first thing that they produce is that it is not a conversation, it's not a dialogue, it's not discourse. It's just shoving down your throat the same message over and over again. And so I think why so many people are now flocking to the other side and flocking to the Daily Wire and PragerU is because these content producers are just willing to have the conversation. They have people on their show who have different viewpoints. They're not all just staunch conservatives. They're opening up the floor to have a dialogue that we are told we're not allowed to have. And I think that invites in a lot of different people. And I think it brings more people to our side.
Okay, now you heard Gina Florio Bontempo express in that interview her conversion back to conservative ideology. You also heard her mention her relationship with Candace Owens and her references to other conservative sources like the Daily Wire. But it doesn't stop there. If you look on screen, you should see a post that I've added from her IG on June 27, 2020, and it reads as follows. Gina says, I just got a surge of new followers and I'm not sure why, but I'm happy to have you all here. And then she says a little about me. My day job, I managed Candace Owens and worked with Pierre Wilson on all things Blexit. We have 11 chapters across the country and 5 national events coming up, so join us. Now, if you look to the right of the page, you can see that she mentioned Pierre Wilson with Blexit, and you can see that Pierre Wilson is a major player in the Blexit movement, right? Now, for those of you who are not aware of Blexit, it is a name for black exit, okay? Black exit. That's how they came with the word Blexit. And that is black exit from the Democratic Party. So Pierre Wilson as well as Gloria are both activists in trying to influence black people to move from the Democratic Party, from the left, through a major organization or movement called Blexit, okay? Now, on their website, the definition of Blexit reads as follows. Blexit is the movement to drive traditional American principles into urban communities across the United States of America, to promote economic independence, individual freedom, strengthen the nuclear family, and foster a deeper appreciation for patriotism in Black American culture. We focus on shifting the culture as well as educating and uplifting minority America through educational programs and acts of community service. Okay? So that's a very nice way of saying that they're trying to get black people away from the left to the right, basically. So when you see Pearl come out of nowhere into black spaces on YouTube, it is plausible that her manager's connections to major conservative sources on the radical right, like Candace Owens, the Daily Wire, and Blexit, can easily serve as an influence on Pearl's topics, talking points, and guests, like Nick Fuentes. Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Wow. Now we cooking with hot grease, y'all. We cooking with hot grease. Do you see that last paragraph? Do you see it? Listen, let me read it to you again, just in case you missed it. It says, many Daily Wire stories repackage journalism from traditional news organizations while adding a conservative slant. Fact checkers have said that some stories shared by the Daily Wire are unverified and that the Daily Wire sometimes misstates facts to advance a partisan view, y'all. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So listen, so now we can understand where Just Pearly Things gets all of her bullshit rhetoric from. There are many times on her shows where Pearl purposely misrepresents historical facts so badly that it leaves her viewers wondering, what the fuck is she talking about? In these cases, Pearl is obviously trying to push an underlining agenda, and I highly suspect that these bullshit talking points are coming from characters from the radical right, like Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro, through her handlers Kobe DeVito and Gino Bontempo. Now, let's keep moving by exploring the background of the creator of the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro. And let's see how his ideologies may be affecting the YouTube platform of Just Pearly Things. If you look on the screen now, you should see a profile summary of Ben Shapiro. That summary reads as follows. In 2016, Shapiro described himself as basically a libertarian. In 2021, he described himself as generally libertarian in regards to the role of the government and as a conservative in regards to the role of social structures. The New Yorker, HATERZ, and Vox have described Shapiro as right-wing. Shapiro's views have been described by the New York Times as extremely conservative and was described by The Economist as a radical conservative and as a classically religious conservative. A 2020 study examining issue framing by right-wing podcasts used the Ben Shapiro Show as an example, which offered a mainstream conservative perspective that favors President Donald Trump and his framing on issues like nationalism in a 2x2 matrix that also examined a Stormfront podcast, an alt-right podcast, and the Daily Standard podcast. The study showed that Shapiro's rhetoric was similar to that used in the Stormfront podcast, though with a different tone. Shapiro accuses the political left of believing in an imaginary hierarchy of victimhood in which the opinions of members of persecuted groups like the LGBT community are afforded more credence. He has argued that the left has dominated American culture through popular entertainment, media, and academia in a way that has made conservatives feel disenfranchised and helped lead to the election of Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election. He has stated that political correctness breeds insanity. Shapiro is an outspoken opponent of safe spaces, especially those on college campuses, arguing that they go against free speech. Shapiro frequently praises Western culture and Western civilization. In 2019, he said, "I believe Western civilization is superior to other civilizations." Now, these are some of his views on race. He has acknowledged that African Americans were historically victims of injustice in the United States, but does not believe in the existence of widespread systematic injustice today. In 2017, Shapiro stated that the idea that Black people in the United States are disproportionately poor because America is racist, that's just not true. Shapiro has dismissed the idea that the United States was founded on slavery and argued that America was founded in spite of slavery. Shapiro is critical of Black Lives Matter and has argued that the Black Lives Matter movement did indeed begin with protests about police brutality, but quickly morphed into broader debates over the validity of looting and rioting, tearing down historic statues, slavery reparations, and defunding the police. So you can see how Ben Shapiro's ideologies, especially those on race, can affect other YouTubers like Pearl through members of his media empire. Remember, Kobe DeVito and Gino Bontempo are not only managers, but they are also conservative journalists with years of experience in media production, which means that they are experts in creating and producing entertaining stories and narratives that have conservative slants. Kobe and GINA are both college graduates. GINA is a graduate of Harvard. Unfortunately, Pearl is not as savvy or as intelligent as her counterparts, so her delivery of their crafted talking points tend to come across as awkward and not well thought out when she speaks on them on her YouTube platform. Now, let's go ahead and move forward on what I think will happen next, now that I have officially called out Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things. Now that I've presented my findings about Hannah Pearl Davis and her management team, I'm sure there will be pushback from Pearl and her naysayers. If you look on the screen now, I have made a list of her anticipated responses with my replies to those responses. I imagine the conversation with Pearl would go a little something like this. Pearl, don't pay attention to Ebony Man 2K. He is just a small YouTuber. Ebony Man, regardless if I have 1 sub, 1,000 subs, or 1 million, I am thorough in my presentation with credible receipts. Any attempt to belittle my efforts will serve as a form of distraction. Pearl, claiming to be from Chicago when I'm not, it's really not that big of a deal. Ebony Man, Chicago is a world-renowned city with international recognition. So for you to try to claim to be from Chicago when you are not is a lame attempt to steal swag that you don't have. Pearl, just because my management is part of the conservative right doesn't mean that I am. Duh. Ebony Man, this is true, but it is plausible that your manager's connections to conservative sources on the radical right can easily serve as an influence on your topics, talking points, and choice of guests. Pearl, I don't know Ben Shapiro, never met Ben Shapiro, so why are you trying to tie me to Ben Shapiro? Ebony Man, just because you don't personally know Ben Shapiro doesn't mean you're not heavily influenced by his ideology through your handlers, Kobe and GINA. For instance, your thoughts on abortion are almost identical to Ben Shapiro's. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my presentation of the truth about Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things, and her management team. I have given you receipts of Pearl's background and where she is really from. I have given you testimony of her immoral business practices from an ex-colleague. I have given you a full background report of her managers Kobe DeVito and GINA Bontempo. And lastly, I've shown how Pearl could be highly affected by the ideologies of Ben Shapiro through his media empire, The Daily Wire, from her managers Kobe and GINA. Well, all right, I hope this presentation has been informative, and feel free to share this video with others, because it is obvious that Hannah Pearl Davis is not who she claims to be, and she does not have our best interests at heart. It appears that Just Pearly Things is being used by the radical right to conquer and destroy people of color. This is Ebony Man 2K, the original king of receipts. Peace, and I'm out.